This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry. Welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Soole. We're looking at episode number 38 right now, and that is the Toronto Cocktail Conference sessions number 9. So we're slowly getting through those 13 that I recorded a couple of months ago. This one is kind of cool and kind of special because you know what happens when you get one of the best cocktail writers in the whole country, multiple award-winning author, paired with another multiple award-winning author from Toronto who just happens to write about beer and whiskey. You end up with a craft spirits cocktail book, and that means that it is Christine Sismondo and Stephen Beaumont, two of my favorite authors of all time. Stephen and Christine, I've had the absolute pleasure of hanging out with at Tales of the Cocktail and in Victoria at Beer Fest and the whole shebang. So when those two got together and decided to compile a craft spirits cocktail book, obviously with my love of BC spirits, I had to get involved with them and sit down and have a chat with them. And they told me something a little bit later in the podcast that kind of made me well up a little bit. I didn't show it when they were there, but it kind of made me well up a little bit and tear up a little bit, which it was very sweet of them, and it meant a great deal to me with what they said. So you're going to have to listen to the very end of the podcast. That's my little hook for that. I hope you enjoy these podcasts, guys. Thanks very much for the support, and have a good weekend. Bye. Steve Lee's a giving guy. Yeah. Little sense, yeah. I didn't get down all the way because that's another, like, you come down from Narrabeen and it's another 45 minutes that way.
I could have spent hours with him. Yeah. He's a really interesting guy.
And he's just as nice as pie.
Yeah.
Like, he's just ridiculously nice. So, I know that Christine's listened to a few of my podcasts, but I keep it pretty light and breezy. It's different. I haven't done one with two people before. Oh, like this anyway, here at TOCC anyway. So how about you start by introducing yourselves? Ladies first.
I'm Christine Sismondo. I live in Toronto. I write about spirits, and with my co-author Stephen Beaumont, we are about to launch a book about Canadian craft spirits.
And I'm her co-author Stephen Beaumont, better known perhaps for writing about beer, which I've been doing for a long time, and 13 books. However, I've also been writing about spirits for almost as long. Beginning with whiskey stuff way back in the early 90s. And, still doing it.
So, the new book, Canadian Craft Spirits, how many distilleries have you got in the book?
Have you memorized the number yet?
167?
Okay.
I think something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there a focus when it comes to the distilleries?
You mean what we tried to be as comprehensive as possible. Mm-hmm. And so we tried not to leave anyone out. There will be, one of the problems is that things are opening as we speak, so it's a little bit difficult to...
And in some cases, closing as we speak.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. The rule we had was only people who have their own brands.
Okay.
So that made the beast a little bit smaller because, we're not dealing with brands that are doing, getting their
co-op stuff. And
exactly,
sort of
yeah.
We also ruled out distilleries that are getting grain-neutral spirits and merely slapping them through the still once and putting them out as their own vodka.
So you went hard on the craft.
Yeah, but we're allowing, well, it's GNS or NGS, however you want to call it. We're allowing NGS for gin production, for liqueurs and things that require a lot of work once you get the NGS. But if you're just going to slap it through the still, put a label on it and call it a vodka, we decided not to include it.
Okay, I did cut down the beast real quick.
Right, well, there's the self-preservation aspect. The book can only be so big, and to treat everybody fairly, you have to figure out some rules in order to keep it from being, let's say, 300 brands in Canada.
As it was, we tasted and made notes for 462 spirits.
Wow. Well, and is BC the biggest the biggest craft distillery areas?
By far. Yeah. Still about 1/3 of all the distilleries in Canada.
Yeah, we have a few.
There's a couple.
Yes.
There's a couple. So, like, I think on the island now we're almost at 20. With more opening.
It's crazy. It's just nuts.
And in terms of sort of adding things at the end, our kind of coming attractions section, Stephen wrote, the rich only get richer with BC because, indeed, like there are even more coming than anywhere else.
Yeah, I currently have like 10 cases of alcohol in my basement that I've got to go through and taste still. And just people keep going. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And some weirder stuff coming out, like Sons of Vancouver's like coconut rum and their weirder stuff. It's just amazing.
Yeah, in order to save our livers, we limited every distillery to a maximum of 4 reviews.
Oh, wow.
So we invited the distiller or distillery owner to choose the brands that they felt best represented themselves. And then we went from there.
There's something like Okanagan Spirits has 33 SKUs.
Yeah.
Which is just insane.
And we only have so many pages.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think I'll start with Christine. Like, how did you get into drinks writing? Like, what's your background to get into, like, what sort of drove you to drinks?
What drove me to drink? During school, I always worked in a bar. And, several bars, restaurants. I was just in the industry. And, I kind of held on to my job for a long time after school because it was great. I went in on a Friday night. I hung out with people. We did some shots here and there. Anyhow, but it wasn't a really great cocktail bar. And I was working there 1 shift a week for some time. And I just kind of got interested in, bringing in better ingredients and trying to make better drinks for the regulars. So on Friday nights, we would kind of, get interested, have little rounds of margaritas and bourbon sours, but properly made. But there was no resource at this time. We're talking like 2003. So I always
like to remind all the kids at home that the internet did not exist in 2003. Well, it did, but it was not really like smartphones and all that sort of stuff didn't exist.
Exactly. And so I really had to turn to classic texts. And then, you found out how many of them are fun and how many of them, like, the guys obviously had a sense of humor when they were writing up the little descriptions and things. And it just kind of became a thing. And I started writing essays about individual drinks, and that turned into a book. And now I'm stuck with it.
So when did your first book come out?
2005.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was that one called?
Mondo Cocktail.
That's right.
Still on my bookshelf at home.
I'm going to track one down.
Oh.
And how did you get into writing?
I wanted to be a writer, but unfortunately I didn't decide this until I was about 3/4 of the way through my university degree. So I did not go to journalism school. I went to political science, and I got my degree in pol sci. My joke is that you do 3 things when you study political science. You write a lot, you talk a lot, and you drink a lot, which set me up for this. So in really around 88, I graduated in 87. 88, I pretty much decided I wanted to write about beer, specialize, have a niche. I taught myself how to taste. I taught myself about beer. Basically, the only books back then were by Michael Jackson, who went on to become a very good friend of mine. And I just really hung in there, and in 2000 was able to convince the Toronto Star to give me a beer column, which ran bi-weekly for about 3 years. Peter Goddard was my editor. He never committed to it. It was always, well, let's just see what happens with the next one. But every 2 weeks it was in the paper. And I brought out my first book in 1994 after talking to Tony Aspler, Canada's famous wine writer, about where he really got legitimacy. And he said he got legitimacy when he brought out his first book. So I started a proposal the next week. I visited every brewery in Canada in 1993 and brought out the book in 1994.
Wow. How many breweries were there back, like at that time?
82.
Across the country?
Across the country.
It's like 82 in Vancouver now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So you've done 13 books. How many books are you on to now, Christine?
Oh, geez. I don't have 13 books. This will be my 3rd book.
Isn't it funny that writing a book was legitimized you as a brand back in the day, and now you just need a YouTube channel?
It is interesting. There are 2 things that I think that people give me too much credit for, and that's having written a book right from the start, And also my MA at the time. I thought, people would ask me questions like medical questions, and I'd be like, it's an MA in literature, people. Like, stand down, right?
But now you just need an Instagram account and you're legit.
That's right.
Yeah, I never would have gotten to this stage if I had started 5 years ago rather than 30 years ago, because I care, and this is going to sound really dismissive, but I care about content.
Yeah.
I like to read good writing. I like to create good writing. I like to bring information rather than a pretty picture.
So how did you guys connect for this book?
Do you want to tell that one?
No, I think you should.
Did you know of each other, or you knew each other?
We've known each other for many years.
Yeah. Socially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Christine has a history of holding these summer parties called the Gin Smackdown, for which she puts out a whole bunch of different gins and some food, and everybody just kind of drinks. It was at one of these that I came up with this crazy idea, which was that we should co-write a story for the Globe and Mail on creating the perfect G&T Ontario style. So we selected, 20 gins? 20 gins in 4 different categories of flavor profiles: London Dry, New World Botanical, Weird, Ingredients, and I forget what the other one was. And then we paired them up with a single tonic to start with, and then multiple tonics when we got to the top gins in terms of the G&T. And we wrote this story for the Globe and Mail, and we had so much fun doing it, it seemed, made sense to do a book.
Is writing the book still fun?
Writing the book stopped being fun months ago.
And adding to sort of the confusion about it is that I had a different book in mind. That we had 2 different book projects, and Stephen one, he had it. So now we have to do mine.
You're just doing distilleries and spirits, you're not putting cocktails in the craft spirits book?
We do have some cocktail recipes that Christine positioned as kind of historic Canadian cocktails. And we have some cocktail recipes that I put together which are classic cocktails, but the qualification is you can make them from a single distillery's brands. So we have a few of those, but it's not a cocktail book, it's a spirits book.
So, Christine, you were one of the founders of the Pizza Box bartender group.
That's right. Yes. I mean, I think Dave is the founder.
The founder.
Yes.
And you were there. You've heard the story about the Pizza Box
I've never heard the story of the Pizza Box bartender.
They all got to, it was years ago, and like I've sat down with Andrew Pollock now. Not Andrew Toplack. Andrew Toplack. I'm sitting down with Paul Clark today. And it's like, and you two as well. It's sort of like, non-industry people. Mm-hmm. And I think in the beer world, it's maybe a little bit different than it is in the cocktail world. Because like if you write about beer sort of like folds in really easy. But then in the cocktail world, like Christine and Andrew and Paul Clark's editor of Imbibe now, but like never started off as industry people. Like it was always like, okay, well I write about it or I fall in love with it and that sort of thing. And now that if they show up at an event, you're like, okay, well it's Christine and it's Andrew. We got people in Victoria like that. So the Pizza Box thing was like they all got together as a community, wrote down everybody's name on the inside of a pizza box, which Dave still has or you still have.
No, I don't have it.
So Dave still
I wouldn't have an old pizza box. I'd have thrown that away by now.
It was. I think I saw it last year during the Bartender at Large podcast that they did. How do you fold yourself into an industry and a community like you have, and sort of been one of the 4 people to help create Toronto's cocktail culture?
And one thing that was really interesting about the Pizza Box thing was that Dave really recognized that there were different camps in the Toronto cocktail world, and that Frankie didn't talk to Jen Ag, and Jen Ag didn't talk to whoever, and it kind of there was no cohesive structure within the community whatsoever. And so the point of having everyone up to the Harvard room was just, so people could actually see each other, because sometimes they didn't go into each other's bars, they didn't have any conversations with each other, et cetera, et cetera. So anyhow, I think it was Kevin Brosh who suddenly just said, like, everybody, let's sign the pizza box. I don't think that was Dave's idea, because we just ordered pizza because we all needed food, and so then Dave held on to it, and that was sort of like our constitution or something like that. I mean, and I have to say, I've done very little in my life with a really direct plan. A lot of things that I've done have just sort of organically happened. So in terms of being kind of involved in the community, a lot of it really came out of things like, judging a competition and getting to know people and then going out for drinks. And I never really intended to insinuate myself into anything.
I think you're a massive supporter of the industry, and I don't think Toronto, regardless of what other people say, but from outside looking in, I don't think Toronto would have the cocktail culture without you backing it. In a way of bringing light to cocktails and different bars and bartenders and stuff like that through your writing.
Well, that's really nice of you to say. I think that the one thing that, as a writer, what I'm interested in generally is other people's stories. I don't really tend to like to write about myself, and that really fit in well with the grid when we started profiling bartenders with their cocktails, which is in 2013 or 12 or something along those lines, which is just when the cocktail scene was really kind of coming together. And I paid attention to other people's stories, and that's what I like to do. And that we were really the grid was really one of the first places that I know of anywhere to do this kind of profiling of bartenders. So I feel very proud of that work, and I think it was really because we were focusing on what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Incidentally, I was a reluctant cocktail writer back in the day. I used to do a drinks page for Nation's Restaurant News out of the United States, working with an editor. God, I've forgotten her name. It's Brett Thorne now, and I've forgotten what her name was before Brett. But I was doing this drinks page, and Gaz Regan was doing the cocktail column. And then Gaz or Gary decided, I'm going to retire from all print and just work on my cocktails in the country thing. And Pam Parsegan came to me and said, would you like to do the cocktail column as well? And I said, no. And so she changed tacks and she said, well, Gaz is just going to finish off here. I've got a gap. Could you just plug in a couple of cocktail columns? And I said, okay, fine, that I can do. Now, this was before anything in Toronto. Toronto was a wasteland for cocktails, because I was going out there trying to find a decent freaking cocktail somewhere in the city, and it was not to be had. I remember sitting with Maggie, my now wife, in the was the entertainment district, still is, at this awful little bar, and being charged $15 for terrible cocktails, like awful cocktails. And this is back in the early, I guess 2004, 2005, something like that. So Pam came back to me after a couple of these installments and said, would you like to do the cocktail column? And I tried saying no again, but she eventually wore me down. And I ran it for a little while, and that Christine actually helped me out a couple of times with information, connecting with bartenders. Yeah. She knew a lot better than I did. And eventually the challenge of trying to keep up with what was going on in the cocktail world was too much, and I had to give up the column.
So now that you're writing a book about craft spirits and being forced into the cocktail world again, kicking and screaming.
I will never be a cocktail writer. I will be a spirits writer. It's too intricate. I still am on top of the beer industry, not just in Canada, United States, but the world. I'm the co-author of the World Atlas of Beer. So there's that, and that is monstrous.
Yeah.
So to try to address the cocktail world on top of that is just, it's more than any one person.
And well, especially with craft beer and what everybody's doing, and like, what did I see the other day? Imperial Heifer Berliner Weiss. I'm just like, okay. Like Berliner Weiss should be like 4%, and you're doing an Imperial Berliner Weiss. I'm like, that doesn't make sense at all.
Oh, yes. Well, that's a whole other podcast.
So you're going to seminar today at Toronto Cocktail Conference, which is, what's it called?
How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Craft Spirits.
And what's the sort of gist for the seminar?
Well, I think what we want to do is we want to introduce 4 of many, many standouts that we discovered, and to use them as a way to sort of illustrate what the issue was for us, which is that I was a little reluctant because I think that we've all had this experience that there were a few spirits that we maybe had early on that weren't absolutely perfect, and that, you know, some people, I think that they've chosen to kind of turn away from the craft spirits industry, especially in the bartending community, and stick with the big guys who are, you know, absolutely reliable and consistent, and I can understand the thinking for that, but that it's time now to have a really good, you know, second look at this industry, because it's really exploded. It's so dynamic, and there's so many interesting spirits out there now, and, you know, much like my experience of having to discover this new world, I hope that other people will do that too.
Yeah, I find it's always a double-edged sword. Like, people get exposed to it, and it's great that they're experiencing a craft spirit from a local distillery, but then if it's not 100% on point, then like, all gins from Ontario suck.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I like to set this up by talking about my experience with the United States craft spirit, because, of course, the U.S. was into this long before Canada was. And I've written for Whiskey Advocate magazine since 1992 or 1993. So I saw this whole thing happen in the United States, and I saw, you know, half bottles of whiskey being sold for $40, $50 that were terrible. I mean, not to put too big a deal or emphasis on it, they were not worth $40. They were $20. They just weren't that good. So I think a lot of people got put off at that point, as Christine said. And, you know, we were both kind of going into this project crossing our fingers and saying, well, you know, we're going to find out a lot about craft spirits in Canada. Hopefully it's good. And my God, it was.
Yes.
Like, we would do these monstrous tastings. I think we did 3 at my place and 2 at yours.
Yeah, that sounds right.
With, like, literally a dining room table covered with bottles. And we're going through these things and we're going, how come none of these are bad?
Yeah.
Like, we're really pleasantly shocked that there's the level of quality is extraordinarily high.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
And I don't need to tell you this because you've been involved with aquavit production and things along those lines.
Yeah, I'm on my 5th spirit now.
But I just think that it's really great. It's also, there's a sort of idea that Canadian spirits are going to be gin, vodka, and whiskey. And that's what everybody makes. But if you look at the things that are being made out there now, I mean, it would be hard. I mean, we haven't found a Fenny or anything like that. But it would be hard to find spirits from other parts of the world that there isn't somebody working on doing a similar spirit here, but with our produce.
There's a
And
Rocky that just came out of BC, which is just mental. Someone's like, and I always find
Mad
this,
Lab.
Yeah, Mad Lab's Rocky is mental.
Bruinwood's Advocat.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Advocat. And to find that, and it's like, oh my God, this is not only an Advocat that's in Canada, but it's really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
And I found there's a couple that have come out now. I did BC Distilled this year, and I'm like, I live by a rule of not why not, but why. Not why, but why not. And it's like Bruinwood and a few of the crazy distilleries that are doing it. It's like, why would you do this? And like, why would not? And the Advocat is just ridiculous. Like, so freaking good. I want to make fluffy ducks all day long.
Oh, it's delicious. It's amazing.
And Nachinos, you know, there's 2 different Nachinos. I mean, and I was speaking with Andrew Toplack yesterday. He wants to do an absinthe festival.
Yeah.
I think you might be able to come up with 10 just from Canada.
Yeah.
There's a surprisingly good pastis in Mississauga.
Wow.
Really?
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Just a classic pastis?
Just a classic pastis.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a lot of French people in Mississauga?
No, he was making an Iraq. And he figured, as long as I'm making Iraq, I might as well make a pastis as well.
Yeah, and that was a really neat story, too. That's the White Distillery. And he's from Syria, and he just said he was not impressed with the quality of Levantine Iraq in Canada, so he decided that he needed to make his own here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It's amazing.
I think you're going to see more distilleries in Canada moving towards that, because how many gins can you, like, how many bars can you go and hit, and how many liquor stores can you go hit with your gin? Like, it's always that thing. So how many vodkas can you have?
Well, with gin, we're going to end up in the UK situation pretty soon, because we have significantly fewer people than they have in the UK, and the UK is just awash in gin. I'm still waiting for a gin bar to open in Toronto. I'm surprised one has not yet. But yeah,
that's actually really surprising.
There are going to be way too many gins eventually. And that's going to winnow some out, and people are going to have a backup product. Yeah. Gin's going to become the new vodka, and everyone's going to go, well, I've had enough of these, and I'm going back to Tanqueray, or I'm going back to Beefeater, or something like that.
Because the price point on the gins too is really not great. You still can get a very good, like a Broker's or whatever, for $26 or $27 at the LCBO. It's hard to justify going to 40 or 50 for a craft spirit unless it's really spectacular.
Yeah. And that's why I stay, like, with my projects, I stay away from just doing gins and that sort of thing, because it's just not, I don't see it being worth it for the distillery. So working on a brandy right now with Divine up in Zanich, and it's going to be Solera style brandy. So they've got rid of their gins. They've got rid of their gins except for the Geneva, and we put all that juice into barrels, because the juice is fantastic, like the grape distillate before it got turned into gin. So I think that the diversity of spirits in Canada is going to, outside of gin and vodka, is just going to keep going. Yes, there's so much stuff. Yeah, like we got Amaros
and whiskeys. 2 years from now, my God, we're going to be so awash in whiskey.
Well, it's good now. Like, it goes back to that double-edged sword. Like, there was a lot of BC distilleries that put out a whiskey way too young, and it, like, again, $80 a bottle, and then people are like, you can taste that it's young. It's got like all the wood's not great, and then people didn't touch it again. But now, like Shelter Point and those guys have just like stepped up the game hard.
Yeah. Yukon. Amazing whiskeys coming out of Yukon. Shelter Point, of course. Glen Breton or Glenora. They're doing some great stuff now. Not so much in their early days, but now it's really hit its stride. So
awesome. So when's the book coming out?
October.
Is it done? Edits finished?
Well, that's a funny story. We got our
every single author I talk to that's like bringing out a book in the next like month. So David, DeKokomo, me, you guys. Editors are just killing us right now.
Yeah, well, because it was this week that we got our proofs back, and we have to have them done by the end of the week. We are on top of it, but it did make this conference a little bit challenging. Yeah. Yeah,
but we got way behind the 8 ball on this, partly because of my fault, partly because of my father's fault. My father passed away in November, which we were in the middle of working on the book, and that kind of really set me back on my heels. So we were supposed to have it finished end of January. I think we had it finished end of, June-ish?
I think that sounds like that? Right.
Yeah. This is exactly what happened with me.
Really?
Yeah. Bartenders, man. They suck. 165 bartenders from across the country, and all you're asking is for a 2-paragraph bio and a recipe. Facebook messages, Instagram messages,
right?
Highlighting people.
Let me tell you, most distillers aren't any better. And all brewers are horrible.
Yeah, our jobs are really just herding cats at that point, right? Yes.
Yeah, I walked into Atwater Cocktail Club in Montreal on Friday night after I landed, and Thomas Yeo was behind the bar, and because we're both tall guys above the crowd, and he looks at me, he's like, "Hey," and then you see it go click, click, click. He's like, "I owe you pictures." I'm like, "Yes, you do." Yes, you do. And the amount of people that have come to the conference, like, that I haven't met, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you reached out to me about your book. Thank you very much for including me." Or like, "Oh, hey, I forgot to get you pictures, and you still asked for that prep recipe, right?" I'm like, "Yep, still waiting on it, bud. Like, if you just send it through, that'd be fantastic."
Should we tell them about the sidebar?
His?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you might know that. I think I had to ask you a question for that.
We have a series of sidebars in the books, and one of them in the BC section is about you. As the under recognized, was it?
Yes.
Force behind BC craft spirits.
And I think you're the only person. All the sidebars. Yeah, you're the only person who actually got a sidebar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, all the other sidebars are recipes or,
I'm just really passionate, especially about BC spirits. I just think I'm just passionate about what all these distillers are doing. There's a lot of small guys. Like, most of the time, the projects that I've done and been a part of, they didn't come to me. I went to them, and I pitched like to multiple distilleries to do something. So the Academy project with Sheringham, I actually pitched to 2 distilleries before Sheringham picked it up.
Uh-huh.
And that was just falling in love with Academy in Iceland, and I had 12 with me, and I took them up to Jason when he was in the original distillery, and we tasted all of them. Like, I feel this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. He's like, yeah, I feel that. And then the Amaro as well, I wanted to do a Mepicon, so I just kept hitting up distilleries. That was like 7 distilleries. They were like, I have no idea what you're talking about, no. And then Legends finally said, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Same thing with the brand. I've wanted to do a BC brandy for a long time. Not try and mimic cognac or anything like that, just try and do an American-style brandy like they're doing in California, and they did in the early 1900s. And so I hit up Divine. Divine's like, yeah, let's do it. And
That's great.
Yeah. And I just think there's a lot of distillers out there that don't get enough credit. There's bigger guys that get a lot of marketing dollars in BC now, and that's what people sort of gravitate towards. And it's great that they're like Empress 1908 is everywhere now.
Right.
You can't go anywhere without a freaking purple gin popping up.
Yeah.
It's like in 48 states or something in the US.
Wow, they did a good job.
They told me it's like 90% of their production.
Yeah.
American?
No,
Period.
period.
Oh, I see, yes.
They literally make nothing else except for the 1908. So I'm really looking forward to the book, guys. I thank you very much for sitting down with me. I know you're going to get off and get seminars started. And what time's your seminar today?
4.
4? Oh, you
Yeah.
got plenty of time.
Yeah, we've got lots of time.
And what spirit are you tasting?
Oh,
can you say?
Goodness.
Yes.
How many are you doing?
We're tasting 4. The first one is I'm going to talk about because I think it's spectacular and it's unusual. It's one of the few craft distillery vermouths out there in Canada. It's from the TOCC winery.
Okay.
Yeah. And then?
And then we move on to Loon Vodka, which is made at Ontario's northernmost distillery. It's also the only distillery that has a license still in their home. It's actually, so it's a wild, quirky little place with a phenomenal vodka. And, I mean, when is the last time I talked to you about the phenomenal vodka, right? We were just blown away by how great this was.
It was a life-changing vodka.
Yeah, yeah, it's phenomenal. And they have all sorts of weird processes that they've actually put milk in the mash at one point. It's just a really interesting story. And then we're moving on to a place in Peterborough called Black's, and they have a gin. And they are just really dedicated to sort of, the guy fell in love with Scottish spirits, and he's just trying to put the same amount of care into everything he's doing in Peterborough with red Fife wheat, and it's really great. And then we finish off, because we've got to finish off with a whiskey. We're having one of the Central City whiskeys.
Nice.
That's right?
Yep.
Yeah. And again, another distillery that I've known Gary Lowen from his brewing days, way back to Sailor Hager's. And when he came out with their first whiskeys, he sent some to me, and I went, okay then. And now they're really good whiskeys.
Yeah,
so just that development over time has been terrific to see.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for sitting down with me. I know that TOCC is just a beast to try and wrap people around. I got to do 5 more podcasts today.
Thank you for the time, Shawn, and we're looking forward to your book too.
Thank you, and I'll see you guys downstairs most likely.
All right.
Always a pleasure, Shawn.
Thanks, Booze Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you're listening, whatever platform you're on, give me a good rating, subscribe, listen along. I'm going to keep going. I really enjoy sitting down with people and learning where they're from, what they did, and how they got to where they were. So if you love it, give me a good 5 stars. If you don't, give me 1 and I'll try harder.